The Philadelphia Eagles are in the heart of their OTA program, and the roster battles that will span an entire offseason are beginning to shape up. Who are the wildcards that have the best shot of making the team? Who are the players on the bubble that really need to step up? This is my first attempt at projecting how this 53-man roster is going to look come week 1 of the regular season, but I want to hear your comments down below. Who are the underdogs you're rooting for? Who are the big names you think may not make the cut? My name is Jenkins, and this is my first 53-man roster projection for 2019. As always, if you're new around here and haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like if this is the sort of content you enjoy. We want to build the biggest base of Philadelphia sports fans possible, and we need your help to be a part of it. And don't forget, you can see daily content from myself and all of our writers at Philly Sports Network over at phillysportsnetwork.com. Alright, so let's kick things off with the quarterback position, and what we typically see is the Eagles carrying 3 here: their quarterback, their backup, and their project arm. But I do think this year could be a little bit different. There is a chance that Clayton Thorson, who was drafted in the 5th round, is exposed to waivers with the chance of landing on the practice squad, but it all does of course depend on how the offseason fares for him. Outside of that, there are no real shocks here. Carson Wentz and Nate Sudfeld retained their current positions in the quarterback hierarchy, but Cody Kessler moves on. The former Browns and Jags QB shouldn't be seen as a threat to Sudfeld, and if he does have a strong preseason as anticipated, a backup needy team is going to come calling and will be more than happy to guarantee him a future with a slightly higher upside than Philly can offer. This is Carson Wentz's quarterback room right now, make no mistake about it, but they're likely going to carry 3 names going into 2019. On to the running back position, and there is our first shock of this roster projection. Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders are almost locks at this point, while it's Corey Clement and Boston Scott making up the 4 running backs that the Birds will carry. The Wendell Smallwood era comes to an end in Philadelphia. Don't get me wrong, he's everything you could want in an RB4 and gives you impactful snaps in a pinch, but the jack of all trades becomes the odd man out here, given that every other back listed has one area of key strength. And if you're a fan of this channel, if you've seen the Eagles film room on Boston Scott, you'll know how high I am on him as a kick returner and a potential rotational guy. Scott is one of my favourite wildcards to make this year's roster, and may be the Eagles' best kept secret at running back. If you take Jordan Howard's bulldozing mentality, Miles Sanders' elusive skill set, Corey Clement's versatility and kind of combination of the former two, and then Boston Scott's real Darren Sproles-like skill set, I think that's a completer backfield as you can find in the NFL. On to the offensive line, and this year I think they're going to take 9 as opposed to 10. All of the headliners are of course on this roster, but the real surprises come at the depth positions. Obviously, first round selection Andre Dillard needs a spot. Jordan Mailata is likely going to have a roster spot going into year number 2. Matt Pryor, who is this versatile second-year player out of TCU, is likely going to be contesting for a swing depth spot, and that leaves 2 names: Halapoulivaati Vaitai and Stefan Wisniewski. And if we look at last season, yes, offensive line depth was a minor issue, but nowhere near as important as it was in the secondary or at defensive tackles. So I think they'll go one lighter here, knowing they've got enough versatility to go one deeper at a position of need for that depth. So in my opinion, this battle is going to come between Halapoulivaati Vaitai and Stefan Wisniewski. Wiz, the Super Bowl 52 champion who started at left guard and was benched midway through the 2018 season for bizarre reasons, to put it frankly, returned to the Eagles on a 1-year deal after testing free agency unsuccessfully. But with Halapoulivaati Vaitai in his contract year, being cross-trained during OTAs, lining up at guard, we know that Brandon Brooks is the long-term future, but how many games is he going to miss? If it's only 2 or 3, I'm sure that Vaitai, with his thicker base and firmer frame, may be even a little bit more favourable if he can hit the ground running during the offseason. Alongside his former TCU running mate Matt Pryor, then having the future heir to the left tackle throne in Dillard, and of course the developmental Jordan Mailata, that just gives you everything you need at the offensive line position. So I don't know, I think this is a very volatile situation. We could see Wiz make the roster and they end up cutting Vaitai or Matt Pryor, but those are the 3 names that I would say are firmly on the bubble going into June and July. At tight end, there are no surprises at all. 4 tight ends almost seems like a necessity here. Doug Peterson seems intent on running a lot of 12 personnel sets, and the Eagles lost 13 personnel completely when Richard Rodgers went down with injury last year. Josh Perkins didn't show anything too much of note during his regular season snaps, but Will Tye absolutely could provide a spark this offseason. Of course, there's a long way between now and training camp, and there is a chance that the Eagles decide to bring in a tight end or maybe even move one of their bigger receivers out and flex in a similar vein to the one Trey Burton played during his time with the Eagles. Either way, I think 3 tight ends at a minimum is necessary, so that's Ertz, Goddard and Rodgers. Is there going to be a 4th? It's certainly possible, but it may not even be a name currently on the roster. And finally, let's talk wide receivers. The Eagles carried 6 on their roster last year, but I think they'll go 1 less in 2019. The reason for this is to carry an extra defensive back. In my opinion, the Eagles have one of the best receiving corps in the NFL and a luxury of depth at corner, so it makes sense to drop a receiver and pick up a DB. Now, Mack Hollins, if healthy, should be a lock to make the roster. I think he could be a shoo-in to eventually take over the slot reins from Nelson Agholor. There was a piece I wrote on Philly Sports Network recently about this. There will be a film room as well. Of course, health is a big concern right now, but outside of there, you do have Shelton Gibson, who could end up finding a second wind under Deshaun Jackson's mentorship, and maybe even a guy like Braxton Miller, Greg Ward or Charles Johnson to watch out for. While 6'6" Carlton Agudosi brings intrigue to the table, we're gonna play it safe this early into proceedings. I think Jeffrey, Jackson, Agholor, Sager and Mack Hollins provide you more than enough considering the amount of 12 and 13 personnel this offense will now be using and the versatility of running backs. On to the defensive side of the football, and starting off with defensive end, it's a familiar scenario for many. It's Graham Barnett up front with Vinny Curry and Sharif Miller at the D3 and D4 spots, while the edge 5 spot is going to go to Josh Sweat. I think it's that last spot that's the only real one that's up in the air. The first 4 are all but solidified, but it's Josh Sweat versus Joe Ostman that will headline the training camp battle at the position. The coaching staff love Joe Ostman, but Sweat is a 4th round pick with a lot to prove. That will be a very fun battle to watch this offseason. There is a chance they do run a little bit heavier at defensive end, but I think the versatility of a guy like Malik Jackson, who can line up at the 3 or the 5 tech spot, will give them that luxury to run with 5, and know that will be enough. Talking of Malik Jackson, let's look at defensive tackle, a spot where I can see the Eagles taking one more player, as I mentioned earlier in this video. The lack of depth cost them hugely in 2018. Fletcher Cox was forced to carry the entire unit on his shoulders during a career year where he played nearly every snap on the field. That simply cannot happen again. Now, of course, we've got Timmy Jernigan back in the fray, and Malik Jackson will play a vital role in making sure history doesn't repeat itself, but it's the DT3 and 4 spots that really matter the most, and I think they need to bring a 5th just to make sure they don't run scarily light if they do lose a starter. Bo Allen and Destiny Vio played 64% of snaps combined during 2017. The Eagles were missing that last year. They won't let it happen again. And the 2 names to watch here are going to be Trayvon Hester, who I think showed the Eagles plenty during his first season with the team, and undrafted free agent out of UAB, Anthony Rush, who at 6'5", 350 pounds is an absolute monster. And I think on double teams and plays where he can eat up space and allow those rapid defensive ends to feast, he could be a really important addition for this defensive line if he can develop during the offseason. So the Eagles go 1 heavier at defensive tackle, but what about linebacker? Believe it or not, all of the familiar names are going to make the roster here, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for surprises. TJ Edwards, Joey Alfieri and Alex Singleton are all players who could upset the apple cart this summer, but the Eagles have a very strong linebacker crop right now following the signing of Zach Brown and the return of Paul Warrilow, who missed his lone season in Philadelphia with an ACL injury. Now, Nigel Bradham's going to be the cornerstone here, and with Kamugugia Hill leading the Eagles in back-to-back seasons in special teams tackles, I think they've really got themselves a solid foundation to build on, especially when you factor in LJ Fort into that equation. On to the secondary, and this is where things really get interesting. We're going to start off with cornerback, and to put it simply, the Eagles find their 6 most talented corners making the roster. While there could be some wiggle room over who starts at CB2 or CB3, the rotation of players should be the same regardless, barring any injuries or trades. This is of course a crucial year for the Eagles cornerbacks, and guys like Cravon LeBlanc, Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones all have a lot to prove, while Avonte Maddox proved last year that he could play literally anywhere on the defense, and that is going to play a vital role in our next position group. The Eagles are going to carry just 3 safeties: Malcolm Jenkins, Rodney McLeod and Blake Countess. Andrew Sandejo could become an off-season casualty, with the compensatory pick formula working against him. But with Blake Countess on the scene and a group of very versatile corners who need playing time, hey Avonte Maddox, who started at safety a couple of times last year, there is a chance they run light at safety as a result. The only other shock here is Trey Sullivan not making the 53-man roster. The signing of Countess should provide the Eagles with enough upside to move into 2019 with full confidence. the former Eagles draftee became a special teams ace for the Rams and could inject that same tenacity into Phipp's prized unit. Talking of which, the specialists should come as no surprise. It's Cam Johnston's iron leg, Jake Elliott's clutch kicks, and Rick Lovato at long snapper, and that rounds out our 53-man roster for 2019. But what do you guys think? Who are the underdogs you want to see make the roster? Do you agree or disagree with my current projection? Let me know down in the comments. You can follow my Twitter at Liam Jenkins PSN or at Philadelphia PSN for Philly Sports Network. And from myself, Liam Jenkins, I'll see you next time.